Alright, Titans, this is Mr. Spilker here. Hello and welcome to Chapter 2, Section 2, Adding Real Numbers. So go ahead and put that heading on your notes. Chapter 2, Section 2, 2.2, Adding Real Numbers. We have two objectives today. You obviously do not need to write these down. Those two objectives are to be able to add numbers with like signs and add numbers with unlike signs. Alright, a quick question just to get you thinking about adding and subtracting real numbers. Here we have Shelly. She opened a savings account with $67. Later, she deposited another $25. Finally, she made a withdrawal of $51. How much money was left in her checking account? Put some thought into that, pause the video, answer it, and then we'll come back to this at the end of the lesson and see if you are correct. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, tonight's lesson is all about adding. Now, with adding two signed numbers, you have to make sure you know the rules. There's two sets of rules. There's rules if the signs are the same, and there's rules for if the signs are different. If the signs are the same, or in other words like signs, you find the sum of the absolute values, and then you use the sign common to both numbers. You'll often hear the phrase with this of just simple same signs, you add the two numbers and keep the sign they share. Same signs, add, and keep. If the signs are different, or in other words unlike signs, what you do is you find the difference of the absolute values. You use the sign of the number with the greater absolute value. So the way we explain that with different signs is if you have different signs, you subtract the two numbers and then take the sign of the bigger number. So if the signs are different, subtract, take the sign of the bigger number. Now the rules we had on that last slide sometimes are tough for students to remember. So, one of my favorite childhood songs was Row, Row, Row Your Boat. I sang this song quite frequently throughout my childhood. I would sing, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. And I would just sing this song all the time. Well, once I got really into math, I started singing the same tune, but a little bit different words. So go ahead and, with me right now, please sing. Same signs add and keep, different signs subtract. Take the sign of the larger number, your sum will be exact. Alright, some of you guys didn't sing. Let's sing again. Same signs add and keep, different signs subtract. Take the sign of the larger number, your sum will be exact. As you can tell, I'm a pretty talented singer. I would maybe compare myself to someone such as CeeLo Green, or maybe someone, I've often heard people mention me in the same breath as John Lennon. I'm going to sing one more time for you. Sing with me. Same signs add and keep, different signs subtract. Take the sign of the larger number, your sum will be exact. I'm trying to get the song in your head, because if you can remember the song, you can remember the rules. Alright, Titans, now that we know the rules, let's go ahead and apply them to some examples. So go ahead in your notes right now, write down example number 1, and it's negative 15 plus negative 37. Now to add negative 15 and negative 37, I see that the signs are the same. And the rules are with same signs, add and keep. So I'm going to take 15 and 37, I'm going to disregard their signs, I'm going to add them. If you add 15 and 37, you end up with good old 52. Now remember, the answer is not 52 because it's same signs, add and keep. So we got to keep the sign they share. They were both negative, so my answer must be negative. Same signs, add and keep. Example 2, we have different signs. The signs are different. So since the signs are different, I go ahead and I subtract them. Now when you subtract them, just disregard the signs. Take the bigger one minus the smaller one, and you get 13. Now then, the last thing you must do is decide if that should be a positive or negative 13. In this case, the bigger number was 29, and 29 had a negative number, so my answer is negative 13. Maybe go ahead and pause the video. Make sure you got these two examples written down in your notes. They're two good examples. Same signs, add and keep. Different signs, subtract. Same signs, add and keep. Different signs, subtract. Now, you might be thinking, oh, this is an easy lesson. I got this. Stop. Do not stop the video. Keep on going. We got to be able to do this with decimals and fractions because this lesson is adding real numbers, not just simply adding integers. Adding real numbers. That means you got to be able to add every type of number. So let's jump into decimals. Ladies and gentlemen, when you think about adding and subtracting decimals, always think line up the decimal points. Line up the decimal points. I have a picture of kids lining up in elementary school. Just like you'd line up in elementary school, line up your decimal points. So let's look at example 1 here. 6.98 plus 0.2. So I have different signs, so I'm going to subtract. So I take the bigger number minus the smaller number. Notice I line up my decimal points. I'm going to go ahead and fill in a 0 for what's missing. Now 8 minus 0 is 8. 9 minus 2 is 7. 6 minus 0 is 6. So if my signs are different, I subtract and then take the sign of the bigger number. The bigger number is positive. So my answer is positive 6.78. Another example. Put this one down in your notes also. I have same signs. Since I have same signs, I'm going to add and keep. So I'm going to take the two numbers and I'm going to add them together. I'm going to disregard the signs for the time being. When I add them together, I get 7, 4, and 11. Same signs, add and keep, so they're both negative. I got to keep that sign. My answer is negative 11.47. Negative 11.47. Whenever you add decimals, line up the decimal points. Whenever you add decimals, line up the decimal points. And then don't forget your rules. Same signs, add and keep. Different signs, subtract, and take the sign of the larger number. Now we jump into fractions. I'm going to go ahead and finish this video strong by going over a fraction example. Whenever you think of adding and subtracting fractions, you must think common denominator. Whenever you add and subtract fractions, you must have a common denominator. So not only do I need to apply my rules with adding real numbers, I also must remember the rules for when we add and subtract fractions. So in this case, I have different signs. So when you have different signs, you subtract. So I'm going to take the bigger fraction minus the smaller fraction. Now, when I subtract here, I have to have a common denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and rename my fractions. So what is the common denominator of 5 and 4? Well, remember, the common denominator is always the smallest number that 5 and 4 can multiply to be. So when you think of the multiples of 4, you think of 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. When you think of the multiples of 5, you think 5, 10, 15, 20. Yep, you're correct, guys. 20 is what they have in common. So I'm going to rename these fractions so that they have a denominator of 20. So I'm going to multiply the first fraction by 4 because 5 times 4 is 20. So that's going to make the new top be 8. And I'm going to multiply the bottom by 5 because 4 times 5 is 20. So that makes the top become 5. Now, 8 twentieths minus 5 twentieths is 3 twentieths. And 5 minus 2 is 3. Now, oftentimes students get so into okay, I do this fraction problem, I'm going to do this fraction problem, that they forget their sign. I must go back and always check, last thing, do I have my sign correct? So I think back to my rules. Same signs, add and keep. Different signs, subtract. Here I had different signs, so I subtract, and then I got to take the sign of the bigger number. The bigger number was negative. My answer must be negative. All right, Titans, that concludes our teaching video for 2-2 adding real numbers. Once again, sing it with me. Same signs, add and keep. Different signs, subtract. Take the sign of the larger number. Your sum will be exact. There's a second verse. That second verse is for subtraction, which we will learn tomorrow. So you'll have to wait to hear my voice once again for subtraction. I'll practice my voice, I'll keep it fresh, and I will perform for you again tomorrow. So the answer to the teaser question was 41. You take that 67 plus 25 for the deposit, minus 41 for the withdrawal. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Have a great rest of your day. We'll look forward to working with this information with you in class. Have a good one.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.